14. Promoter of true human culture. Modern religion. Buddhism is strong enough to face any modern views which pose a challenge to religion. Buddhist ideas have greatly contributed to the enrichment of both ancient and modern thought. Its teaching of causation and relativism, its doctrine of sense data, its pragmatism, its emphasis on morality, its non-acceptance of a permanent soul, its unconcern about external supernatural forces, its denial of unnecessary rites and religious rituals, its appeal to reasoning and experience, and its compatibility with modern scientific discoveries all tend to establish its superior claim to modernity. Buddhism is able to meet all the requirements of a rational religion which suit the needs of the future world. It is so scientific, so rational, so progressive that it will be a matter of pride for people in the modern world to call themselves Buddhists. In fact, Buddhism is more scientific in approach than science, it is more socialistic than socialism. Among all the great founders of religions, it was the Buddha alone who encouraged the spirit of investigation among his followers and who advised them not to accept even his own teaching with blind faith. Therefore, it is no exaggeration to say that Buddhism can be called a modern religion. Buddhism is a well-elaborated scheme of how to lead a practical life and a carefully thought-out system of self-culture. But more than that, it is a scientific method of education. This religion is best able in any crisis to restore our peace of mind and to help us to face calmly whatever changes the future may have in store. Without sensual pleasure, would life be endurable? Without belief in immortality, can people be moral? Without resorting to divinity, can we advance towards righteousness? Yes, is the answer given by Buddhism. These ends can be attained by knowledge and by the purification of the mind. Knowledge is the key to the higher path. Purification is that which brings calmness and peace to life and renders a person indifferent to and detached from the vagaries of the phenomenal world. Buddhism is truly a religion suited to the modern, scientific world. The light which comes from nature, from science, from history, from human experience, from every point of the universe, is radiant with the noble teachings of the Buddha. Religion in a scientific age. Religion without science is lame, while science without religion is blind. Today we live in a scientific age in which almost every aspect of our lives has been affected by science. Since the scientific revolution during the 17th century, science has continued to exert tremendous influence on what we think and do. The impact of science has been particularly strong on traditional religious beliefs. Many basic religious concepts are crumbling under the pressure of modern science and are no longer acceptable to the intellectual and the well-informed person. No longer is it possible to assert truth derived merely through theological speculations or based on the authority of religious scriptures in isolation from scientific consideration. For example, the findings of modern psychologists indicate that the human mind, like the physical body, works according to natural, causal laws without the presence of an unchanging soul as taught by some religions. Some religionists choose to disregard scientific discoveries which conflict with their religious dogmas. Such rigid mental habits are indeed a hindrance to human progress. Since modern people refuse to believe anything blindly, even though it had been traditionally accepted, such religionists will only succeed in increasing the ranks of non-believers with their faulty theories. On the other hand, some religionists have found it necessary to accommodate popularly accepted scientific theories by giving new interpretations to their religious dogmas. A case in point is Darwin's theory of evolution. Many religionists maintain that human beings were directly created by God. Darwin, on the other hand, argued that human beings had evolved from the ape, a theory which upset the doctrines of divine creation. Since all enlightened thinkers have accepted Darwin's theory, the theologians today have little choice except to give a new interpretation to their doctrines to suit this theory which they had opposed for so long. In 1998, Pope John Paul II announced that human beings may be the result of gradual evolution and not the immediate creation of God as previously proclaimed. New Sunday Times, October of 1998. Increasingly the same is becoming true about rebirth, which no intelligent person disputes today. It is a matter of time before some holy books will be rewritten on that subject as well. In the light of modern scientific discoveries, it is not difficult to understand that many of the views held by many religions regarding the universe and life are merely conventional thoughts which have long been superseded. Buddhism and science. Until the beginning of the last century, Buddhism was confined to countries untouched by modern science. Nevertheless, from its very beginning, the teachings of the Buddha were always open to scientific thinking and critical examination. One reason why the teaching can easily be embraced by the scientific spirit is that the Buddha never encouraged rigid, dogmatic belief. He did not claim to base his teachings on faith, belief, or divine revelation, but allowed great flexibility and freedom of thought, and he never committed himself on subjects which were outside the scope of verification by human intelligence. The second reason is that the scientific spirit can be found in the Buddha's approach to spiritual truth. The Buddha's method for discovering and testing spiritual truth is very similar to that of the scientist. A scientist observes the external world objectively, and would only establish a scientific theory after conducting many successful practical experiments. Using a similar approach 25 centuries ago, the Buddha observed the inner world with detachment, and encouraged his disciples not to accept any teaching until they had critically investigated and personally verified its truth. Just as the scientist today would not claim that his experiment cannot be duplicated by others, the Buddha did not claim that his experience of enlightenment was exclusive to him. Thus, in his approach to truth, the Buddha was as analytical as the present-day scientist. He established a practical, scientifically worked-out method for reaching the ultimate truth and the experience of enlightenment. While Buddhism is very much in line with the scientific spirit, it is not correct to equate Buddhism with science. It is true that the practical applications of science have enabled mankind to live more comfortable lives and experience wonderful things undreamed of before. Science has made it possible for humans to swim better than the fishes, fly higher than the birds, and walk on the moon. Yet the sphere of knowledge acceptable to conventional, scientific wisdom is confined to empirical evidence. And scientific truth is subject to constant change. This is because, ultimately, science does not know the ultimate truth. As it gropes about in semi-darkness, it has to constantly shift its positions, as it discovers new truths it had never thought possible before. As yet, science cannot give human beings control over their mind, and it certainly cannot offer moral control and guidance. Despite its wonders, science has indeed many limitations not shared by Buddhism. Limitations of science. Often one hears so much about science and what it can do, and so little about what it cannot do. Scientific knowledge is limited to the data received through the sense organs. It does not recognize reality which transcends sense data. Scientific truth is built upon logical observations of sense data which are continually changing. Scientific truth is, therefore, relative truth not intended to stand the test of time. A scientist, being aware of this fact, is always willing to discard a theory if it can be replaced by a better one. Science attempts to understand the outer world and has barely scratched the surface of humanity's inner world. Even the science of psychology has not really fathomed the underlying cause of human mental unrest. When a person is frustrated and disgusted with life, and the inner world of this person is filled with disturbances and unrest, science today is very much ill-equipped to help him or her. The social sciences which cater for human environment may bring a certain degree of happiness. But unlike animals, humans require more than mere physical comfort and need help to cope with their frustrations and miseries arising from their daily experiences. Today so many people are plagued with fear, restlessness, and insecurity. Yet science fails to help them. Science is unable to teach the people to control their minds when they are driven by the animal nature that burns within themselves. Can science make human beings morally better? If it can, why do violent acts and immoral practices increase in countries which are so advanced in science? Isn't it fair to say that despite all the scientific progress achieved and the advantages conferred on humans, science leaves their inner selves unchanged? It has only heightened their feelings of dependence and insufficiency. In addition to its failure to bring security and confidence to mankind, science has also made everyone feel even more insecure by threatening the world with the possibility of mass destruction. Science is unable to provide a meaningful purpose of life. It cannot provide humanity with clear reasons for living. In fact, science is thoroughly secular in nature and unconcerned with their spiritual goal. The materialism inherent in scientific thought denies the psyche goals higher than material satisfaction. By its selective theorizing and relative truths, science disregards some of the most essential issues and leaves many questions unanswered. For instance, when asked why great inequalities exist among people, no scientific explanation can be given to such questions which are beyond its narrow confines. Learned ignorance. The transcendental mind developed by the Buddha is not limited to sense data and goes beyond the logic trapped within the limitation of relative perception. The human intellect, on the contrary, operates on the basis of information it collects and stores, whether in the field of religion, philosophy, science, or art. The information for the mind is gathered through our sense organs, which are inferior in so many ways. The very limited information perceived makes our understanding of the world distorted. Some people are proud of the fact that they know so much. In fact, the less we know, the more certain we are in our explanations. The more we know, the more we realize our limitations. A brilliant scholar once wrote a book which he considered as the ultimate work. He felt that the book contained all the literary gems and philosophies. Being proud of his achievement, he showed his masterpiece to a colleague of his who was equally brilliant, with the request that the book be reviewed by him. Instead, his colleague asked the author to write down on a piece of paper all he knew and all he did not know. The author sat down deep in thought, but after a long while failed to write down anything he knew. Then he turned his mind to the second question, and again he failed to write down anything he did not know. Finally, with his ego at the lowest ebb, he gave up, realizing that all that he knew was really ignorance. In this regard, Socrates, the Athenian philosopher of the ancient world, had this to say when asked what he knew: "I know only one thing, that I do not know." Beyond science. Buddhism goes beyond modern science in its acceptance of a wider field of knowledge than is allowed by the scientific mind. Buddhism admits knowledge arising from the sense organs as well as personal experiences gained through mental culture. By training and developing a highly concentrated mind, religious experience can be understood and verified. Religious experience is not something which can be understood by conducting experiments in a test tube or examined under a microscope. The truth discovered by science is relative and subject to changes, while that found by the Buddha is final and absolute. The truth of Dharma does not change according to time and space. Furthermore, in contrast to the selective theorizing of science, the Buddha encouraged the wise not to cling to theories, scientific or otherwise. Instead of theorizing, the Buddha taught mankind how to live a righteous life to discover ultimate truths. The Buddha pointed the way through which we can discover within ourselves the nature of life by living a righteous life, by calming the senses, and by casting off desires. And as a result, the real purpose of life can be found. Practice is important in Buddhism. A person who studies much but does not practice is like one who is able to recite recipes from a huge cookery book without trying to prepare a single dish. His hunger cannot be relieved by book knowledge alone. Practice is such an important prerequisite of enlightenment that in some schools of Buddhism, such as Zen, practice is put even ahead of knowledge. The scientific method is outwardly directed, and modern scientists exploit nature and the elements for their own comfort, often disregarding the need to harmonize with the environment and thereby polluting the world. In contrast, Buddhism is inwardly directed and is concerned with the inner development of humans. On the lower level, Buddhism teaches the individual how to adjust and cope with events and circumstances of daily life. At the higher level, it represents the human endeavor to grow beyond oneself through the practice of mental culture or mind development. Buddhism has a complete system of mental culture concerned with gaining insight into the nature of things, which leads to complete self-realization of the ultimate truth, nirvana. This system is both practical and scientific. It involves dispassionate observation of emotional and mental states. More like a scientist than a judge, a meditator observes the inner world with mindfulness and objectivity. Science without religion. Without having moral ideals, science poses a danger to all mankind. The bullet and bomb are gifts of science to the few in power on whom the destiny of the world depends. Meanwhile, the rest of mankind waits in anguish and fear, not knowing when the nuclear weapons, the poisonous gases, the deadly arms, all fruits of scientific research designed to kill efficiently, will be used on them. Not only is science completely unable to provide moral guidance to mankind, it has also fed fuel to the flame of human craving. Science devoid of morality spells only destruction. It becomes the draconian monster man discovered. And unfortunately, this very monster is becoming more powerful than man himself. Unless man learns to restrain and govern the monster through the practice of religious morality, the monster will soon overpower him. Without religious guidance, science threatens the world with destruction. In contrast, science, when coupled with a religion like Buddhism, can transform this world into a haven of peace and security and happiness. Never was there a time when the cooperation between science and religion has been so desperately needed in the best interest and service of mankind. Religion without science is blind, while science without religion is crippled. Tribute to Buddhism. Albert Einstein paid a tribute to Buddhism when he said in his autobiography, "If there is any religion that would cope with modern scientific needs, it would be Buddhism." Buddhism requires no revision to keep it up to date with recent scientific findings. Buddhism need not surrender its views to science because it embraces science besides going beyond science. Buddhism is the bridge between religious and scientific thoughts by stimulating man to discover the latent potentialities within himself and his environment. Buddhism is timeless. Religion of freedom. This is a religion of freedom and reason for human beings to lead a noble life. Buddhism does not prevent anyone from learning the teachings of other religions. In fact, the Buddha encouraged his followers to learn about other religions and to compare his teachings with other teachings. The Buddha says that if there are reasonable and rational teachings in other religions, his followers are free to respect such teachings. It seems that certain religionists try to keep their followers in the dark. Some of them are not even allowed to touch other religious objects or books. They are instructed not to listen to the preachings of other religions. They are enjoined not to doubt the teachings of their own religion, however unconvincing their teachings may appear to be. They believe that the more they keep their followers on a one-track mind, the more easily they can keep them under control. If any one of them exercises freedom of thought and realizes that he or she had been in the dark all the time, then it is alleged that the devil has possessed their mind. People are given no opportunity to use their common sense and education. Those who wish to change their views on religion are taught to believe that they are not worthy to be allowed to use free will in judging anything for themselves. According to the Buddha, religion should be left to one's own free choice. Religion is not a law, but a disciplinary code which should be followed with understanding. To Buddhists, true religious principles are neither a divine law nor a human law, but a universal law. In actual fact, there is no real religious freedom in any part of the world today. People have no freedom even to think freely. Whenever they realize that they cannot find satisfaction through their own religion to which they belong, which cannot provide them with satisfactory answers to certain questions, they have no liberty to give it up and to accept another which appeals to them. The reason is that religious authorities, leaders, and family members have taken that freedom away from them. People should be allowed to choose their religion which is in accordance with their own conviction. One has no right to force another to accept a particular religion. This is particularly obvious when people from two different religions fall in love. Some people surrender their religion to get married, without a proper understanding of their partner's religion. Religion should not be changed to suit a person's emotions and human weaknesses. One must think very carefully before changing one's religion. Religion is not a subject for bargaining. One should not change one's religion for emotional, personal, material gains. Religion is to be used for spiritual development and for self-salvation. Buddhists do not try to influence other religionists to come and embrace their religion for material gain. Nor do they try to exploit poverty, sickness, illiteracy, and ignorance in order to increase the number of Buddhists in the population. The Buddha advised those who indicated their wish to follow him, not to be hasty in accepting his teachings. He advised them to consider carefully his teaching and to determine for themselves whether it was practical or not for them to follow. This is why there has never been a ritual baptism to be performed before one is converted to Buddhism. Buddhism teaches that mere belief or outward rituals are insufficient for attaining wisdom and perfection. In this sense, outward conversion becomes meaningless. To promote Buddhism by force would mean pretending to propagate justice and love by means of oppression and injustice. It is of no importance to the followers of the Buddha whether they call themselves Buddhists or not. Buddhists know that only through their own understanding and exertion will they come nearer to the goal preached by the Buddha. Amongst the followers of religions there are usually some fanatics. Religious fanaticism is dangerous. A fanatic is incapable of guiding himself by reason or even by the scientific principles of observation and analysis. According to the Buddha, Buddhists must be free. People must have an open mind and must not be subservient to anyone for their spiritual development. They seek refuge in the Buddha by accepting him as a source of supreme guidance and inspiration. The devotee seeks refuge in the Buddha, not blindly, but with understanding. To Buddhists, the Buddha is not a savior nor is he an anthropomorphic being who claims to possess the power of washing away others' sins. Buddhists regard the Buddha as a teacher who shows the path to salvation. Buddhism has always supported the freedom and progress of mankind. Buddhism has always stood for the advancement of knowledge and freedom for humanity in every sphere of life. There is nothing in the Buddha's teaching that has to be retracted in the face of modern, scientific inventions and knowledge. The more new things that scientists discover, the closer they come to the Buddha's explanation of the universe and how it operates. The Buddha emancipated human beings from the thraldom of religion. He also released them from the monopoly and the tyranny of priestcraft. It was the Buddha who first advised people to exercise their reason and not to allow themselves to be driven meekly like dumb cattle, following the dogma of religion. The Buddha stood for rationalism, democracy, and practical, ethical conduct in religion. He introduced this teaching for people to practice with human dignity. The followers of the Buddha were advised not to believe anything without considering it properly. In the Kalama Sutra, the Buddha gave the following guidelines to a group of young people. Do not accept anything based upon mere reports, traditions, or hearsay, nor upon the authority of religious texts, nor upon mere reasons and arguments, nor upon one's own inference, nor upon anything which appears to be true, nor upon one's own speculative opinions, nor upon another's seeming ability, nor upon the consideration, "This is our teacher." But, when you know for yourselves that certain things are unwholesome and bad, tending to harm yourself or others, reject them. And when you know for yourselves that certain things are wholesome and good, conducive to the spiritual welfare of yourself as well as others, accept and follow them. Buddhists are advised to accept religious practices only after careful observation and analysis, and only after being certain that the method agrees with reason and is conducive to the good of one and all. True Buddhists do not depend on external powers for their salvation. Nor do they expect to get rid of miseries through the intervention of some unknown power. They must try to eradicate all their mental impurities to find eternal happiness. The Buddha says, "If anyone were to speak ill of me, my teaching and my disciples, do not be upset or perturbed. For this kind of reaction will only cause you harm. On the other hand, if anyone were to speak well of me, my teaching and my disciples, do not be overjoyed, thrilled or elated, for this kind of reaction will only be an obstacle in forming a correct judgment. If you are elated, you cannot judge whether the qualities praised are real and actually found in us." Brahmajala Sutra. Such is the unbiased attitude of a genuine Buddhist. The Buddha upheld the highest degree of freedom not only in its human essence but also in its divine qualities. It is a freedom that does not deprive human beings of their dignity. It is a freedom that releases one from slavery to dogmas and dictatorial religious laws or religious punishments. Buddhist missionaries. Go forth, O Bhikkhus, for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many, out of compassion for the world, for the good, benefit, and happiness of gods and men. The Buddha. When we turn the pages of the history of Buddhism, we learn that Buddhist missionaries spread the noble message of the Buddha in a peaceful and respectable way. Such a peaceful record should put to shame those who have practiced violent methods in propagating their religions. Buddhist missionaries do not compete with other religionists in converting people in the marketplace. No Buddhist missionary or monk would ever think of preaching ill will against so-called unbelievers. Religious, cultural, and national intolerance are un-Buddhistic in attitude, to people who are imbued with the real Buddhist spirit. Aggression never finds approval in the teaching of the Buddha. The world has bled and suffered enough from the disease of dogmatism, religious fanaticism, and intolerance. Whether in religion or politics, people make conscious efforts to bring humanity to accept their own way of life. In doing so, they sometimes show their hostility towards the followers of other religions. Buddhism never interfered with the national traditions and customs, art, and culture of the people who accepted it as a way of life but allowed them to exist and encourage further refinement. The Buddha's message of love and compassion opened the hearts of people and they willingly accepted the teachings, thereby helping Buddhism to become a world religion. Buddhist missionaries were invited by independent countries which welcomed them with due respect. Buddhism was never introduced to any country through the influence of colonial or any other political power. Buddhism was the first spiritual force known to us in history which drew closely together large numbers of races which were separated by the most difficult barriers of distance, language, culture, and morals. Its motive was not the acquisition of international commerce, empire building, or to follow the migratory impulse and occupy fresh territory. Its aim was to show how people could gain more peace and happiness through the practice of Dharma. A sparkling example of the qualities and approach of a Buddhist missionary was Emperor Asoka. It was during Emperor Asoka's time that Buddhism spread to many Asian and Western countries. Emperor Asoka sent Buddhist missionaries to many parts of the world to introduce the Buddha's message of peace. Asoka respected and supported every religion at that time. His understanding about other religions was remarkable. One of his scripts engraved in stone on Asoka pillars, and still standing today in India, says, "One should not honor only one's own religion and condemn the religion of others, but one should honor others' religions for this or that reason. In so doing, one helps one's own religion to grow and renders service to the religions of others too. In acting otherwise one digs the grave of one's own religion and also does harm to other religions. Whosoever honors his own religion and condemns other religions, does so indeed through devotion to his own religion, thinking, 'I will glorify my own religion.' But on the contrary, in so doing he injures his own religion more gravely, so concord is good. Let all listen, and be willing to listen to the doctrines professed by others." Around 268 BC, he made the doctrines of the Buddha a living force in India. Hospitals, social service institutions, universities for men and women, public wells, and recreation centers sprang up with this new movement, and the people thereby realized the cruelty of senseless wars. The golden era in the history of India and the other countries of Asia was the period when art, culture, education, and civilization reached their zenith. These occurred at the time when Buddhist influence was strongest in these countries. Holy wars, crusades, inquisitions, and religious discrimination do not mar the annals of the history of Buddhist countries. This is a noble history mankind can rightly be proud of. The great Nalanda University of India, which flourished from the 2nd to the 9th century, was a product of Buddhism. It was the first university that we know of and which was open to international students. In the past, Buddhism was able to make itself felt in many parts of the East, although communication and transport were difficult and people had to cross hills and deserts. Despite these difficult barriers, Buddhism spread far and wide. Today, this peace message is spreading in the West. Westerners are attracted to Buddhism and agree that Buddhism is the only religion that is in harmony with modern science. Buddhist missionaries have no need or desire to convert those who already have a proper religion to practice. If people are satisfied with their own religion, then, there is no need for Buddhist missionaries to convert them. They give their full support to missionaries of other faiths if their idea is to convert the wicked, evil, and uncultured people to a religious way of life. Buddhists are happy to see the progress of other religions so long as they truly help people to lead a religious way of life according to their own faith and enjoy peace, harmony, and understanding. On the other hand, Buddhist missionaries deplore the attitude of certain missionaries who disturb the followers of other religions. Since there is no reason for them to create an unhealthy atmosphere of competition for converts if their aim is only to teach people to lead a religious way of life. In introducing the Dharma to others, Buddhist missionaries have never tried to use imaginary exaggerations depicting a heavenly life in order to attract human desire and arouse their craving. They did not create fear in people's minds by saying that they would go to hell if they did not follow the Buddha. Instead, they have tried to explain the real nature of human and divine life as taught by the Buddha. 15. War and peace. Why is there no peace? Humans have forgotten that they have a heart. They forget that if they treat others kindly, others will treat them kindly in return. We are living in a world of really amazing contradictions. On the one hand, people are afraid of war, on the other hand, they prepare for it with frenzy. They produce in abundance, but they distribute miserly. The world becomes more and more crowded, but people become increasingly isolated and lonely. They are living close to each other as in a big family, but each individual finds him or herself more than ever before, separated from his or her neighbor. Mutual understanding and sincerity are lacking very badly. One person cannot trust another, however good the latter may be. When the United Nations was formed after the horrors of the Second World War, the heads of nations who gathered to sign the charter agreed that it should begin with the following preamble. Since it is in the minds of men that wars begin, it is in the minds of men the ramparts of peace should be erected. This very same sentiment is echoed in the first verse of the Dhammapada, in which the Buddha states, all mental states have mind as their forerunner, mind is their chief, and they are mind-made. If one speaks or acts with a defiled mind, suffering follows one even as the wheel follows the hoof of the draft ox. The belief that the only way to fight force is by applying more force has led to the arms race between the great powers. And this competition to increase the weapons of war has brought mankind to the very brink of total self-destruction. If we do nothing about it, the next war will be the end of the world, where there will be neither victors nor victims, only dead bodies. Hatred does not cease by hatred, by love alone does it cease. Such is the Buddha's advice to those who preach the doctrine of antagonism and ill will, and who set men to war and rebellion against one another. Many people say that the Buddha's advice to return good for evil is impractical. Actually, it is the only correct method to solve any problem. This method was introduced by the great teacher from his own experience. Because we are proud and egoistic, we are reluctant to return good for evil, thinking that the public may treat us as cowardly people. Some people even think that kindness and gentleness are effeminate, not macho. But what harm is there if we settle our problems and bring peace and happiness by adopting this cultured method and by sacrificing our dangerous pride? Many people cannot be satisfied without taking revenge for the mistakes done to them by others. Tolerance must be practiced if peace is to come to this earth. Force and compulsion will only create intolerance. To establish peace and harmony among mankind, each and everyone must first learn to practice the ways leading to the extinction of hatred, greed, and delusion, the roots of all evil forces. If mankind can eradicate these evil forces, tolerance and peace will come to this restless world. Today the followers of the most compassionate Buddha have a special duty to work for the establishment of peace in the world and to show an example to others by following their master's advice. All tremble at punishment, all fear death, comparing others with oneself, one should neither kill nor cause to kill. Dhammapada 129. Peace is always obtainable. But the way to peace is not only through prayers and rituals. Peace is the result of achieving harmony with our fellow beings and with our environment. The peace that we try to introduce by force is not a lasting peace. It is an interval in between the conflict of selfish desire and worldly conditions. Peace cannot exist on this earth without the practice of tolerance. To be tolerant, we must not allow anger and jealousy to prevail in our minds. The Buddha says, no enemy can harm one so much as one's own thoughts of craving, hate and jealousy. Dhammapada 42. Buddhism is a religion of tolerance because it preaches a life of self-restraint. Buddhism teaches a life based not on rules but on principles. Buddhism has never persecuted or maltreated those whose beliefs are different. The teaching is such that it is not necessary for anyone to use the label Buddhist to practice the noble principles of this religion. The world is like a mirror, and if you look at the mirror with a smiling face, you can see your own beautiful smiling face. On the other hand, if you look at it with a long face, you will invariably see ugliness. Similarly, if you treat the world kindly, the world will also certainly treat you kindly. Learn to be peaceful with yourself and the world will also be peaceful with you. Humankind is given to so much self-deceit that they do not want to admit their own weakness. They will try to find some excuse to justify their action and to create an illusion that they are blameless. If one really wants to be free, one must have the courage to admit one's own weakness. The Buddha says, "Easily seen are others' faults, hard indeed it is to see one's own faults." Can we justify war? The difference between a dogfight and a war between two groups of people is only in its preparation. The history of mankind is a continuous manifestation of people's greed, hatred, pride, jealousy, selfishness, and delusion. During the last 3,000 years, we have fought 15,000 major wars. Is it a characteristic of humans? What is our destiny? How can we end this senseless destruction of one another? Although human beings have discovered and invented many important things, they have also made great advances towards the destruction of their own kind. This is how many human civilizations have been completely erased from this earth. Modern human beings have become so sophisticated in the art and techniques of warfare that it is now possible for them to reduce entire cities to ashes within a few seconds. The world has become a storehouse of military hardware as a result of a game called military superiority. We are told that the prototype of a nuclear weapon more powerful than the atomic bomb which was dropped at Hiroshima, Japan in August 1945 is being planned. Scientists believe that a few hundred thermonuclear weapons will chart the course towards universal destruction. Just see what we are doing to our world. Think what sort of scientific development it is. See how foolish and selfish we are. People should not pander to their aggressive instincts. They should uphold the ethical teachings of the religious teachers and display justice with morality to enable peace to prevail. Treaties, pacts, and peace formulae have been adopted and millions of words have been spoken by countless world leaders throughout the world who proclaim that they have found the way to maintain and promote peace on earth. But for all their efforts, they have not succeeded in removing the threat to mankind. The reason is that we have all failed to educate our young to truly understand and respect the need for selfless service and the danger of selfishness. To guarantee true peace, we must use every method available to us to educate youths to practice love, goodwill, and tolerance towards others. The Buddhist attitude. Buddhists should not be the aggressors even in protecting their religion or anything else. They must try their best to avoid any kind of violent act. Sometimes they may be forced to go to war by others who do not respect the concept of the brotherhood of humans as taught by the Buddha. They may be called upon to defend their country from external aggression, and as long as they have not renounced the worldly life, they are duty-bound to join in the struggle for peace and freedom. Under these circumstances, they cannot be blamed for becoming soldiers or being involved in defense. However, if everyone were to follow the advice of the Buddha, there would be no reason for war to take place in this world. It is the duty of every cultured person to find all possible ways and means to settle disputes in a peaceful manner, without declaring war to kill his or her fellow human beings. The Buddha did not teach his followers to surrender to any form of evil power, be it a human or supernatural being. Indeed, with reason and science, humanity has been able to conquer nature, and yet they have to secure their own lives. Why is it that life is in danger? While devoted to reason and being ruled by science, people have forgotten that they have hearts which have been neglected and left to wither and be polluted by passions. If we cannot secure our own lives, then how can world peace be possible? To obtain peace, we must train our minds to face facts. We must be objective and humble. We must realize that no one person, nor one nation is always wrong. To obtain peace, we must also share the richness of the earth, if not with equality then at least with equity. There can never be absolute equality, but surely there can be a greater degree of equity. It is simply inconceivable that 5% of the world's population should enjoy 50% of its wealth. Or that 25% of the world should be fairly well fed and some overfed, while 75% of the world is always hungry. Peace will only come when nations are willing to share and share equitably, the rich to help the poor and the strong to help the weak, thus creating international goodwill. Only if and when these conditions are met, can we envision a world with no excuse for wars. The madness of the armaments race must stop. We must try to build schools instead of Air Force jets, hospitals instead of nuclear weapons. The amount of money and human lives that various governments waste in the battlefield should be diverted to build up the economies to elevate the standard of living. The world cannot have peace until people and nations renounce selfish desires, give up racial arrogance, and eradicate egoistic lust for possession and power. Wealth cannot secure happiness. Religion alone can effect the necessary change of heart and bring about the only real disarmament, that of the mind. All religions teach people not to kill, but unfortunately this important precept is conveniently ignored. Today, with modern armaments, we can kill millions within 1 second, that is, more than so-called primitive tribes did in a century. Very unfortunately, some people in certain countries bring religious labels, slogans and banners into their battlefields. They do not know that they are disgracing the good name of religion. Verily, O monk, said the Buddha, due to sensual craving, kings fight with kings, princes with princes, priests with priests, citizens with citizens. The mother quarrels with the son quarrels with the father, brother with brother, brother with sister, sister with brother, friend with friend. Majjhima Nikaya. We can happily say that for the last 2,500 years there has never been any serious discord or conflict created by Buddhists that led to war in the name of this religion. This is a result of the dynamic character of the concept of tolerance contained in the Buddha's teaching. Can Buddhists join the army? You can be a soldier of truth, but not an aggressor. One day, Sinha, a general of an army, went to the Buddha and said, I am a soldier, O blessed one. I am appointed by the king to enforce his laws and to wage his wars. The Buddha teaches infinite love, kindness, and compassion for all sufferers. Does the Buddha permit the punishment of the criminal? And also, does the Buddha declare that it is wrong to go to war for the protection of our homes, our wives, our children, and our property? Does the Buddha teach the doctrine of complete self-surrender? Should I suffer the evildoer to do what he pleases and yield submissively to him who threatens to take by violence what is my own? Does the Buddha maintain that all strife, including warfare waged for a righteous cause, should be forbidden? The Buddha replied, he who deserves punishment must be punished. And he who is worthy of favor must be favored. Do not do injury to any living being, but be just, filled with love and kindness. These injunctions are not contradictory, because the person who is punished for his crimes will suffer his injury not through the ill will of the judge but through the evil act itself. His own acts have brought upon him the injury that the executors of the law inflict. When a magistrate punishes, he must not harbor hatred in his heart. When a murderer is put to death, he should realize that his punishment is the result of his own act. With this understanding, he will no longer lament his fate but can console his mind. And the Blessed One continued, the Buddha teaches that all warfare in which man tries to slay his brothers is lamentable. But he does not teach that those who are involved in war to maintain peace and order, after having exhausted all means to avoid conflict, are blameworthy. Struggle must exist, for all life is a struggle of some kind. But make certain that you do not struggle in the interest of self against truth and justice. He, who struggles out of self-interest to make himself great or powerful or rich or famous, will have no reward. But he who struggles for peace and truth will have great reward, even his defeat will be deemed a victory. If a person goes to battle even for a righteous cause, then Sinha, he must be prepared to be slain by his enemies, because death is the destiny of warriors. And should his fate overtake him, he has no reason to complain. But if he is victorious, his success may be deemed great, but no matter how great it is, the wheel of fortune may turn again and bring his life down into the dust. However, if he moderates himself and extinguishes all hatred in his heart, if he lifts his downtrodden adversary up and says to him, "Come now and make peace and let us be brothers," then he will gain a victory that is not a transient success, for the fruits of that victory will remain forever. Great is a successful general, Sinha, but he who conquers self is the greater victor. This teaching of conquest of self, Sinha, is not taught to destroy the lives of others, but to protect them. The person who has conquered himself is more fit to live, to be successful and to gain victories than is the person who is the slave of self. The person, whose mind is free from the illusion of self, will stand and not fall in the battle of life. He, whose intentions are righteousness and justice, will meet with no failures. He will be successful in his enterprise and his success will endure. He who harbors love of truth in his heart will live and not suffer, for he has drunk the water of immortality. So struggle courageously and wisely. Then you can be a soldier of truth. There is no justice in war or violence. When we declare war, we justify it. When others declare war, we say, it is unjust. Then who can justify war? People should not follow the law of the jungle to overcome human problems. Mercy killing. Mercy and killing can never go together. According to Buddhism, mercy killing cannot be justified. Mercy and killing can never go together. Some people kill their pets on the grounds that they do not like to see the pets suffer. However, if mercy killing is the correct method to be practiced on pets and other animals, then why are people so reluctant to do the same to their beloved ones? When some people see their dogs or cats suffer from some skin disease, they arrange to kill those poor animals. They call this action, mercy killing. Actually, it is not that they have mercy towards those animals, but they kill them for their own precaution and to get rid of an awful sight. And even if they do have real mercy towards a suffering animal, they still have no right to take away its life. No matter how sincere one may be. Mercy killing is not the correct approach. While the consequences of this killing are different from killing with hatred towards the animal, Buddhists have no grounds to say that any kind of killing is justified. Some people try to justify mercy killing with the misconception that if the motive or reason is good, then the act itself is good. They then claim that by killing their pet, they have the intention to relieve the unhappy animal from its suffering and so the action is good. No doubt their original intention or motive is good. But the misguided act of killing which occurs through a later thought, requires some degree of cruelty or hard-heartedness which will certainly bring about unwholesome results. Avoiding mercy killing can create inconvenience to many. Nevertheless, the Buddhist religion cannot justify mercy killing as completely free from bad reactions. However, we must add that to kill without any greed, anger, or hatred has less bad reaction than to kill out of intense anger or jealousy. It must be remembered that a being, human or animal, suffers owing to his or her bad karma. If by mercy killing, we prevent the working out of one's bad karma, the debt will have to be paid in another existence. As Buddhists, all that we can do is to help to reduce the pain of suffering in others. Killing for self-protection. The Buddha has advised everyone to abstain from killing. If everybody accepts this advice, human beings would not kill each other. In the case where a person's life is threatened, the Buddha says even then it is not advisable to kill in self-defense. The weapon for self-protection is loving kindness. One who practices this kindness very seldom comes across such misfortune. However, people love their lives so much that they are not prepared to surrender themselves to others. In actual practice, most people would struggle for self-protection. It is natural and every living being struggles and attacks others for self-protection, but the karmic effect of the aggression depends on their mental attitude. During the struggle to protect himself, if a man happens to kill his opponent although he had no intention to kill, then he does not create bad karma resulting from that death. On the other hand, if he kills another person under any circumstances with the intention to kill, then he is not free from the karmic reaction, he has to face the consequences. We must remember that killing is killing. When we disapprove of it, we call it murder. When we punish man for murdering, we call it capital punishment. If our own soldiers are killed by an enemy, we call it slaughter. However, if we approve a killing, we call it war. But if we remove the emotional content from these words, we can understand that killing is killing. In recent years, many scientists and some religionists have used the expressions like humane killing, mercy killing, gentle killing, and painless killing to justify the ending of a life. They argue that if the victim feels no pain, if the knife is sharp, killing is justified. Buddhism can never accept these arguments because it is not how the killing occurs that is important, but the fact that the life of one being is unnaturally terminated. No one has any right to do that for whatever reason. The Buddhists stand on the death sentence. The Buddhist concept on the death sentence is clear. We must not only respect the law of the country but we must also strictly obey it. Religion and law can be seen as two different aspects of life. Buddhism, as a religion, teaches man to be good, to do good and do no evil. However, as a religion, none of its members have the power to punish anybody who has defied its precepts, to commit evil, to steal, to rape, to commit murder or to traffic in drugs. Any Buddhist who chooses to defy the law of the country by committing serious crime will have to be punished by the laws of the country and not by the religious body. As Buddhists and as human beings, we are full of compassion for suffering humanity, but compassion by itself does not go far enough to be of help. Compassion does not help to restrain a person who has chosen to go against the law of the country. The laws of the country must be respected and upheld to the very letter. If law stipulates that for committing a serious crime you must pay for it by having your life taken away from you, then the process of law must take its course. Buddhism cannot interfere with the normal enforcement of the law. The only line of action members of our religion can take is to ask for compassion and plead for clemency to be extended to an accused. The laws of our country are democratically enacted by the people themselves through the certain electioneering process. The people elect their representatives to serve as members of Parliament. In Parliament the members debate and promulgate laws for the smooth administration of the country. Without specific laws, then we have to revert back to the law of the jungle where might is right. Although in effect, members of Parliament enact the laws, they do so as representatives of the people. If we, the people, enact the laws, we have no choice but to comply implicitly with our laws. If anyone chooses to defy them, then they must pay for it. This may sound harsh, but laws of such nature existed even in the time of our Lord Buddha. Well over 2,500 years ago. In those days there were kings and rulers who had to administer the country where good and bad people existed as they do now. From time immemorial, human nature being what it is, society consisted of good people. Religion teaches and guides every human being to lead a good and noble life to gain eventual spiritual attainments. Religion does not condone evil. Even though a religionist may infringe a religious precept, religion should not advocate harsh punishment. Religion cannot sentence a person to death for any fault, but the law can. It was reported that during the Buddha's time, even monks who committed serious crimes were sentenced to death. The Buddha did not and would not interfere with the normal enforcement of the law. The Buddha's view was that if a ruler failed to carry out his functions to punish a criminal for committing a serious offense, the ruler would not be considered as one fit to administer the country. Similarly, if a ruler was to be indiscriminate and punish his subjects who were innocent without good reason, he would also be considered as one who would be unfit to rule. These qualifications were given a long time ago, but the advice and injunctions given by the Buddha stand good even for the present day. Buddhism does not subscribe to the taking of a life, human or animal, under any circumstances, but if someone chooses to transgress the established laws of a country, he or she has to pay the penalty, even if the penalty is a death sentence. One of the important moral codes of Buddhism is to obey the laws of a country. If the law decrees that a war is on and that all able-bodied men are to be conscripted as soldiers to the country, a Buddhist must comply with the law. If as a Buddhists, we feel strongly enough that we should save lives and not to destroy lives, the channel open for us is the democratic process to approach political leaders to cause the affected laws to be amended, but if the consensus was against any change, we have no choice but to obey the law. The law is supreme. Of course, if we do not wish to join the army, the other option is for us to become monks and nuns and retire into a monastery and work for our spiritual advancement. If we choose to remain in society, then we must be prepared to sacrifice ourselves for the good of that society.